Welcome to the Speech Source Podcast. My name is Mary Brazique.
And I'm Kim Dillon. We are two pediatric speech-language pathologists with a combined 25 years of experience.
We are your source for speech, language, feeding, play, and much more in between.
So today we're really excited to talk about something that we've talked about quite a bit over the last 6 months or so, and it's really something that helped get us going on wanting to do something, and this podcast, which turned into this podcast, and just resources and website, and that is just all of the language opportunities that we have in our community and in our environment, and all of those that were kind of lost over the last couple of years. And we just feel like this is such an important topic, and it's so important for our kids and for parents to know what opportunities are out there and the importance of getting our kids exposure to some of these things. And Mary, what are some of the things that you've seen over the last 6 months with kids coming in for speech evaluations? Because one, we have seen a huge increase in our evaluations. And I know it's not just in our clinic. I know it's across the board.
Yes. There's so many more kids coming in. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that, one of the reasons is because people weren't necessarily wanting to start something or come into an in-person setting, understandably, maybe within the past year or two. But what we have seen a tremendous increase in is those early language evaluations.
Yes.
These preschoolers, or not even like 1 to 3-year-olds, is probably the range I'd put it in. But so many kids coming in, and they're saying that either the parent or the pediatrician has said something because the child is not talking as much as they anticipated or expected for their age. So this big increase, not only has it been the same type of child, which is pretty rare actually in what we do, right, Kim? I mean,
yeah.
Children are so individual. To see the same pattern happening over and over is weird.
Yes.
It's like, oh gosh, there's more here. So we saw the same type of children coming in, and they just had all the same patterns. And so I know, Kim, that, like you said, that's what we wanted to talk about and what we really wanted to do something about. There are so many parents who are trying to navigate what's going on with their child. And then obviously the biggest piece is, what do you do next?
Right. And our job, as a speech therapist, is to evaluate and figure out, okay, is there, a true language disorder happening or speech delay happening, or did we just lose a bunch of opportunities? And either way, we're going to figure that out. We're going to provide services. But through our discussion, we also realized these are the kids that are making it in front of us, but there's got to be a ton of kids who aren't. And so we're obviously providing the parents that we're able to work with information and resources and service, but we also wanted to kind of move beyond that and be able to provide more to those who are not getting into the speech setting for whatever reason.
Right. And these are the kids too, especially the ones we're talking about today, who did not have the opportunity, where parents are saying, oh, I don't know, we haven't done that yet. Those type of kids were making such tremendous progress so quickly. And like you said, Kim, we wanted to make sure that everyone should have access to these same tips. And so if you are a listener who has maybe a late talker, or maybe you have an older child who is not talking as much, or for different reasons is not on the path that you thought they would be for language, then hopefully these tips will be helpful to you to first kind of understand what the goal is, what skills we're trying to have for our kids, and then also how do you provide that just in your daily life. Nothing crazy, just every day. It's opportunities all day long.
Right. And I know it's not just in our setting that we're seeing it. I think you're seeing it in the schools and just everywhere. So much opportunity was lost over the last couple of years. And we just look at our little ones who never experienced, those natural interaction with peers, either Mother's Day Out program, preschool, church nurseries, birthday parties, restaurants, grocery store. There are so many things that I don't even think we think of as parents with little ones that you're doing naturally, that language is just coming at them from all areas. And that's what was lost. And that's what we want to talk about today. So that was lost. That happened. We've moved through it. And what can we start doing to make sure that these things are happening again for our kids? And even if, you're not there yet, you're not even at 2 or 3 and you're not seeing any loss, these are things that we can all do for our little ones to make sure they're getting those natural opportunities.
So we're going to go through kind of the patterns of what we are looking for when you come for a speech evaluation for kind of that 1 to 3-year-old range, those kind of late talker type, evaluations. What are we looking for? And then the flip of that is, how do we gain that again, or what opportunities do we give? So, Kim, what would you say would be the first thing that we look for in an evaluation?
For me, it's transition, because the first thing that happens is we're going back into the speech room. And this is sometimes easy for kids, sometimes it's not, and there could be a lot of reasons for that. Transition is always the first thing I'm looking for. And a lot of times these kids have never had to transition yet from place to place. They've never left a parent's side, which we don't. We have parents come back with us, so that's not something that, we're having to worry about. But just any kind of, let's get in the car, let's go wait in the waiting room, let's go back into the room. Sometimes those are hard. And so that's usually the first thing that I'm looking at. And then even throughout the evaluation, being able to go through a task and then we're done with it and we transition to something else, and we do something and we complete it and transition to something else. And I know a lot of people probably don't think that these are speech and language skills, but these are all these like transition, play, just understanding your social environment and routines and commands. These are all those pre-language skills. These all have to be there before you're going to start seeing really good communication. So those are a lot of the things that I look at first. Just how are we following along with some of the routine commands or happening? Mm-hmm. What about you, Mary?
Yeah, transition is that's a great one. The one that I would say is first for me would be play skills. So I always start evaluations by just bringing the child in and getting them comfortable. And I want to see what they do with the toys in the room. So I have, we choose developmentally appropriate toys, maybe some ones are a little harder, some are a little lower, and just to see what happens, what do they do with them? So play skills are definitely a foundation of language. So the first thing that I look for is functional play with these kids. And what that means, really, you can just think about it as like straightforward play, cause effect. Okay, I have a ball and I'm going to bounce it. I'm going to roll it. I have a car. I'm going to put it on the ground. I'm going to go down the track. I'm going to stack blocks. Really functional, like they have blocks sort of have somewhat of a straightforward purpose in play. So I want to see if they play with toys appropriately in functional play. And symbolic play doesn't come in till a little bit later, but if the child was older or they might have started a little sooner, I'm also looking at symbolic play. So with the baby doll, do they pick the baby doll up and pat the back? Do they, with farm animals, are they pretending that the farm animal can eat some corn on the ground or go pretend to play? With pretend kitchen, are they stirring in a pot or pretending to give me something to eat or mom something to eat? So all of those play skills are really things that tell me a tremendous amount about where their language is and where it should be.
And I think when we think about where these skills might have been lost and in these settings, kids watch other kids play and that's how they learn. That's what they're imitating.
Yes.
So they might be at a preschool setting or maybe the nursery, even if it's just for an hour, and somebody else is playing in the kitchen and they're taking that all in, and then they're going to try to pretend play in the kitchen. So this is that parallel play, like that early, we're not even interacting yet, but we're watching the other kids and we're going to imitate them later, or we're going to maybe even play side by side. But a lot of times kids are going to pick this up from watching other kids, even at the park, or maybe siblings. But a lot of times, if they're not close in age, we may not see those imitation skills with the siblings. But that's why some of these skills may have been lost, is they weren't seeing other kids or other peers doing them in other settings.
We've got to treat play just like language, in the sense that we can't just set a toy in front of them and expect them to figure it out.
Right.
How they get and interested in it, why kids are interested in our phones, for example, is because they see us playing on them or us looking at them, and they know, oh, that must be something pretty cool because mom's really into it.
Right.
So that's the same way that we've got to sell toys and get interested in toys. And so it tells me a lot if kids are playing appropriately with toys, because that also means that's the vocab that I want to be using. If they like cars, if they like balls, if they like babies, well, that's going to be their natural first words, right? Car, ball, baby. Mm-hmm. Those are very, very bubbles. Whatever they really enjoy, those would be the words that we would be looking at. So yeah, play skills are important. And Kim, tell us about so one of the things about play skills is sharing and turn taking. So we are looking at this, but not from a you must know how to share as a 1-year-old. That's not it. But no. Tell us about what is it about turn taking that is so important for language?
Well, I think so. The way I usually start with turn taking is I find something like, I might take the bubbles and I blow the bubbles and we get this like, bubbles, and we pop, and then, oh, do you want to turn? And then I'm offering that child a turn. So this is a skill that it's tough, because I feel like even if with 2 and 3-year-olds, even if they've had all the opportunities in the world, turn taking is hard at 2 and 3 and 4, and sharing is hard. But there's so many language opportunities in that, because you're labeling my turn, your turn, and it's just that foundation for back and forth communication. And it's an action and it's a thought process, but that's how we have conversation. You're taking turns. You're giving a thought and someone else is listening, and then they're giving a thought and it's your turn to listen. And some people are better at it than others, even as adults.
Yes. But, yeah, we've all been around that monologuer. That's the person who won't share.
Yeah. So I don't think that 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds should be great at turn taking and sharing it, but it's a time to practice and learn. And that's a lot of what we do. Just in therapy, kind of in general, even if it's not a specific goal, we're always working on turn taking, because with anything we do, it's my turn and then it's your turn. And so I think just understanding that teaching that, there's a meaning for teaching that, because it's going to follow you throughout your, journey of communicating with other people.
Right. And I would say one of the big parts of turn taking is, obviously, the hardest part about it is when it's not your turn. So one of the skills that we're looking at in those examples of when it's not your turn is following directions. Is you have to be listening to the other person talking or taking a turn in order to imitate or hear a direction and respond to it. So when we look at children following directions at this age, we are really, some of the early skills are going to be, do they answer appropriately to a one-step simple question or a simple command? Oh, can you go throw that away? Can
Mhm.
you get your shoes? Give me the block. Some of those really early questions, do they respond to that? Because then, if again, in that turn that they're not providing language, they can be understanding and you're modeling, even when you don't realize it, this is how we form a question. And it's
Mhm.
different than when I just say ball, when I say give me the ball or can you give me the ball? So following directions is a big thing that we will do in an evaluation to see what happens when we ask them to do something. And typically, it's going to be a lot easier for kids to follow direction within a routine that they know versus a new direction. But a lot of that is exactly where the language comes in, and the growth is how do we teach and make sure they really get the language and they aren't just taking cues
Right.
from their environment.
Yeah. And you talk about those familiar settings, and that is what I think is a big piece is when you think we can go through all the different things like the park, the grocery store, a doctor's office, all these different settings, but it comes down to just your family and your child's natural just routines and where they're going to be most of the time throughout their childhood and a school setting, friend settings, just different places. And the more familiar they are with it, hey, take this and go throw it in the trash can. That they're going to transition that to other places that they go and they are familiar in certain settings. And so I think that, besides just the home setting, but going out into the environment in different familiar settings and those just routines, environmental and social routines.
Right. To say, hey, a teacher is saying, hey, go take this marker and give it to your friend.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to, right, to kind of do it in a different setting. And so, speaking of doctors' offices and other community places, one of the things we've talked a lot about is one skill that was definitely not really an opportunity the past few years that we have seen a tremendous difference in with children and evaluations and just working with them would be the concept of waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Is that children really have a very limited understanding of this when they have not had opportunities to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of see this manifest a lot with behaviors, how important it is to wait. And I mean, all you have to do is drive around your hometown to understand that adults are struggling with waiting too,
Right. Yeah.
on the
Mhm.
roads, because everyone is just it's a different concept now. But Kim, tell us what are you thinking about when you think about why waiting is important to kids, and in what ways should they be learning to do that?
This is really the biggest thing I've probably seen over the last few months is not understanding that idea of just like, what's next? What's next? What's next? Let's do this. Now let's do this. And so I think waiting a lot of times, part of that is completing an activity and just waiting through that and the importance of that, because that is going to be another lifelong skill throughout school, throughout a job, is just completing an activity. And that takes patience sometimes, and that takes waiting sometimes. But I also just think a lot of the ways it was naturally lost is, I mean, you think about going to the grocery store with your child and you're going through and you get your groceries and then you're having to wait in line. And that is sometimes the hardest thing to do because you're waiting with all these little fun things around you and you're saying no. And so think of all the language opportunities, even in that setting, learning how to accept no with all the
We
things
are
that they're
not
asking
buying the
for.
200 candy bars around
Right.
us. Yes.
I mean, you can work on labeling there, or maybe, and they're probably obviously requesting. But that whole time you're having to wait your turn. And we're waiting in line because someone's in front of us and right now it's their turn. And then we're going to have our turn. And all of these things kind of run together. There's your turn taking again, and you're waiting. And so this is just a skill that is going to be needed throughout life. And I agree with you, Mary. It's harder for all of us because everything is getting faster and we just get this instant gratification, but it's still such an important skill. And I will be the first to say I love my grocery delivery because I don't have to go anywhere and I don't have to wait. I love all of the quick opportunities that we're getting, but at the same time, I see the need of teaching this skill, this lifelong skill for kids. And even at the park, you want to do that slide, but you have to wait in line. And that's hard. And that's hard for you have a 2-year-old, they're going to want to go to the front of the line. That's a hard concept to understand. And it's not a natural concept. And so you have to teach it. I remember being at the park and having to teach that it is not your turn. And it may even be like holding them back at the end of the line and we're going through a tantrum. And you're right. It usually does manifest in behaviors, but these things just help teach a lot of these skills.
Right. And the waiting is so important because I don't know about you, Kim, but sometimes in the past 2 years with toddlers, schoolers at home, I found myself feeling like a cruise ship director, where I was like, okay, what activity now? How are you engaged now? How
Yeah,
are you
because you
involved?
feel guilty too. You're like, I need to be your everything right now.
Yes, but at the same time, that's not that. Although, of course, we want to provide activities with and for our children, we also have to provide waiting opportunities as well.
Right.
Because that isn't how life works, is constant instant gratification. And one of the things that has been brought up in our friend groups, but with Kim and I, is the whole concept of how hard it's been to go to a restaurant again with our children. Even just as Chick-fil-A indoors are open these days, it's like all the skills were lost. Like, oh my gosh, they have no idea what we should do. We do have to wait for our food. We're not bringing snacks to eat for the 2 minutes that we wait for those chicken nuggets, whatever it is. But we're going to do a whole podcast on how to do restaurants successfully with children. And it is totally possible. And it is a process that you do have to be purposeful about because it isn't something that comes naturally.
Right. And I think with all of these things and throughout, obviously the big thing we're always looking at in evaluations is labeling, language use, and requesting. And any of these opportunities out in the natural environment, that's just happening. You're going to just naturally have opportunities to label things and request things. And what's so great about that is that you may be reading an animal book at home and you have done all of these activities. I love Pinterest and Google and all of the things. Teachers pay teachers. You can get so many great activities to do at home. But what really reinforces that and what makes that meaningful to a child is when they go to the zoo and they actually see a lion, or they actually see a giraffe. They're like, that's real. And then it becomes embedded in their little brains and it's meaningful to them. Or even at the grocery store, there's a real, I know they see real apples at home too, but now I know where the apples come from in the grocery store. I guess going to an apple orchard would even be better because you're really seeing where it comes from.
But right, we're not in that part of the country. Yeah, no apple trees here.
Just that idea of in the grocery store where everything is, even if it shows up on my doorstep, I know it came from somewhere else first.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of apples, we were reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar this week, and we walked outside to go to preschool this morning, and my son is screaming, going, "Caterpillar, caterpillar." And he found one that I guess had fallen off a leaf or something, fallen off a tree. And it just immediately brought back for him, we immediately got to talk about, remember these are going to turn into the butterfly and they're eating and eating right now. And look how like you see how squishy he looks. I bet he's eating lots of food, lots of good food to make him feel good. And that is when, you have that experience of your language coming to life and really embedding and staying when you have those opportunities.
It makes it real for them. And that's what I think is so great about trying to get back into these, art museums and art. And I know a lot of the communities are, but Fort Worth is so lucky to have so many we have a zoo right here, libraries. We have some of the best libraries and story times and reading times. And I also wanted to talk a little bit too about these things are not always easy. So
no,
these are teaching opportunities. So the first time and maybe the second time, maybe you might have tantrums, you might have behaviors, you might feel so overwhelmed and it was just too much. But it's just a way to learn and teach and work through it. And
it will get better.
Yes.
And I mean, plan on it. Yeah, plan on it being bad.
Yes.
And then I promise you will turn that corner and it'll be amazing.
Yeah. And I've had to walk out of places and restaurants and library stores.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
It doesn't matter. Like, it just happens. And so, but these are just opportunities to teach. So don't expect it to be like, oh, we're going to pack up our lunch and we're going to go.
This is not activity. Instagram. No, it does not look picture perfect. And it's this beautiful, thing. But yeah, the realness. Yes. And these are real opportunities. And with real opportunities come real behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that Kim and I wanted to talk about to really wrap up our episode is to talk about what can you do now to say, okay, whatever your family situation looks like, we're going to go through some ways that you can be purposeful about providing language opportunities for your kids in the community. And then also, if you are in a place where you're not able to do that yet for whatever reason, we're also going to talk about some activities that you can even just do in the car or in your own backyard or in the outdoors. So on your short list, we would definitely have going to the park or your nature trails. Number 2, if you have a good museum or zoo, children's zoo or art museum that's a children's art kind of interactive place, those are going to be really good activities to put back on the list. So some things you want to work on when you get there are labeling different things that you're seeing and touching and feeling when you're at the park or the zoo. So you're going to take it at your child's level. So if you don't have a lot of single words yet, just label everything you see that's one word. If you're already at the one word level where maybe they do have the word lion, but we don't have 2-word combinations yet, then make that's your level. Is you're just going to do 2 words together every chance you see. So you might even say sea lion or ooh, look, yellow lion.
Yeah. Or maybe with the actions too, he's lion's sleeping or eating or using that as an opportunity to label some of those actions.
Right. And the verbs are huge because so often when you think about a child's first language, they're going to be such concrete nouns, people, toys, snacks. And so a lot of times a next goal that we write is going to be those first verbs. So like you said, Kim, eat is a great one. Jump, sleep, any of those kind of words, really modeling those. And the museum is great. At the park, again, you can see caterpillars. You can see all kinds of children playing where you're using those great verbs like swing or boy swings and provide all those kind of language opportunities around that. Really labeling is a huge one that you're going to do there. Kim, I know that the library is a really good place that your family has really enjoyed. I'm going to be honest, the library really intimidates me personally and just as a mom. Oh man, thinking about walking into this quiet room with the son that I have just makes me so nervous. So tell me, okay, I know it's on our list. How would you do it? How would you recommend starting to bring your kids to a library?
Well, and I know it's intimidating because it's a quiet place. And so toddlers do not equal quiet.
No.
But that's why it's so great because you can get online. And when we did our resources, we didn't list out specific times because they're changing. And wherever you are in your community, you can look on your look online on the public library and find out which locations they'll have circle time, they'll have little music times. These are dedicated for children. And so that makes me feel like it's a safe place to go with your kids. But I love the library because one, it's working on transitions, getting to and from there. It's working on a lot of those routines of just, we're going to sit down, we're going to do a few songs, we're done. Or we're going to sit down and read a book from beginning to end and we're done. And you may get to sitting down in a couple pages and your kid's done. That's fine. You got there and you started, and next time you can try to stay longer. So it's not a perfect way to do it. It's just learning. It's trying these different things. And I also think that the library can be overwhelming because it's so big and maybe there are going to be too many people. So another great option are bookstores. And so there's some small local bookstores that also offer story time. And these might be less intimidating. These might be a great way to still try to work on some of those routines. And obviously with whatever book is being read, there is just going to be a ton of language and vocabulary opportunities. And then whatever book is read, you can go on your day targeting that vocabulary, or maybe even try to check out a book on your own and find something that you want to check out. And then you're just going to target that vocabulary for the week. We're going to do crafts and we're going to maybe check out a book about an animal. And then next week we're going to the zoo. So there's all these ways to kind of string this and reinforce all of this language together using all of these places that you can go.
Well, and I love how you said to just do it. Just get started somewhere because you learn so much.
Which is really funny for me and you to be saying that.
Oh, yeah, I know.
It's hard when you have a a perfectionist personality to not be I'm not doing this unless I know that we can do it the right way.
Oh, I know. Exactly. And so every time, Kim and I both are, unfortunately, we don't balance each other in those ways. We do have a lot of complementary traits, but both Kim and I have a little perfectionist, I'm afraid, in us. And so, but at the library, or I was going to actually just, since I clearly have not done that with my children yet, I was going to kind of explain a little bit about how just getting started can be very intimidating in general. So, but you really do make so much progress every time you go. So this season, my daughter had soccer practice and soccer games, and I almost liken it to a library in the sense that there were set routines. Like he was expected to walk with our family to the field and then either sit or play in a designated area while there was an activity going on. And that was very challenging. And so every time we would do it, we sometimes had to leave or wait in the car while she was finishing. And we had to each time think about, okay, so what went well this time? What didn't go well? Okay, we're figuring out, okay, how does his brain work and what does he need in order to be able to have a good time or to be able to learn or play with peers that are out there. And in some ways that can, that's like a lot of different routines.
And that's your waiting concept also, like whether he's reading a book with you or whether you're waiting in the car listening to music, which that's another great thing. Sit in the car and listen to super simple songs, or Cocomelon are so full of vocabulary, and you can do finger plays and imitate actions and sing along in the car. Whatever it is, though, he's having to wait. And he's learning that concept of waiting for somebody else to finish something. And I think even if it felt like it was a disaster, they had to wait. And they learned that skill today. So yeah, that can be really hard for siblings and the practices and figuring out what to do with them during that time. But
and no one, and we didn't do this before, people are back to all these,
right.
When you have ballet or gymnastics or whatever, swim, whatever a sibling or or the child is maybe has a lesson for. The whole
Yeah.
waiting
Yeah.
is a whole thing to work on.
My daughter at dance, there happens to be 3 to 5 little brothers in there, and we're in an inside setting, but they'll bring balls and they'll just kick up and down the hallway and toss. And I mean, think about all those things that are happening there. They are watching. So they might be imitating whether they kick or throw the ball there. They're watching and they might try it at home. They're having to share balls. They're, figuring out their space. They're interacting. Some of them are talking, some of them are listening. There's so much stuff happening just in that setting because they're there and they're around other peers.
And they're learning boundaries and participating in the same routine together, and understanding that you can't just chunk a ball at someone's face, that you're kicking it on the, you've got some natural consequences to that.
That stuff happens, and that's how you learn.
Right.
It's so fun to see. Just that's what was missed. A lot of that stuff was missed for some of these little ones. And honestly, it had to happen. Mary, you and I have talked about that. Like, it had to happen. Like, we all had to shut down for quite a while.
No guilt or shame about that. It happened, but moving on. Yes.
Yeah, we were taking care of what we needed to take care of, but that's what happened. And let's figure out how to, make sure that our kids are just getting what they need. So,
right. And I think, that's why we wanted to talk about the why so much too, is that it's one thing to say, oh, your kids need to be out and about more, or kids need to go to school. It's like, okay, but why? Because I don't know that I'm going to follow through with something unless I'm really on board and understand the why. So hopefully by going through some of these things today, it gives parents and caregivers a little more understanding of why these things would be important and what comes out of things like that, games with balls that are thrown or kicked along a hallway with peers, and all of those things like labeling and routines and turn taking are the foundation of language, because it is play and the context of how language happens. And so the last thing we wanted to talk about is maybe we treat children who sometimes have very, very specific needs and health concerns. And it's not always an option for a lot of immunocompromised children to be out in the same way that they were, or maybe would have been a few years back. So here are some things that you can do in the car if you have a child or a family like that, or maybe if you do have 2, 3, however many kids, and the car is part of your life a lot of the time. So during a car ride, you can do so many things in the car, just like you were at a zoo. I mean, think of it as a zoo tram almost. You're just in a structured seat, and you can hear each other well, and you can drive along and label objects in the same way. The 1-word level, the 2-word level, some actions when you see people doing things. You can set them up to understand sequences, like first we're going to get sister from school, then we're going to come back home. Understanding the first, then lots of different things you can do in the car. Kim, you mentioned car washes. What do you like to do? How do you make car wash a language opportunity?
Well, I think you talked about sequences, and that's the great setting for sequence, because first our car gets wet, next we get soap on our car, then it rinses off, and last it's going to dry. And so walking through that sequence, labeling the actions that are happening, it's washing, it's drying, it's cleaning, and then just engaging in that conversation of what's happening. And it's either terrifying or thrilling for a kid. I've had kids that felt like it was both. Because but
shakes
again,
your car. Yes.
And it might be the first time it is a little scary, but then you go through, but it's fun. And it's just a great way to talk about a lot of languages happening. And I know for me, being in the car with kids is such an easy time to check out. And honestly, sometimes that's needed, just to check out and drive. and take a little break, but it's also such a great opportunity to talk and label and listen to music together. And not even just with toddlers. I mean, that's going to go throughout. I mean, I have a teenager, and I feel like in the car is one of the times I like to try to talk. And a lot of times the place I do get some talking back. And so, yeah, just don't underestimate that time in the car, because a lot can happen with language.
Right. And we've talked too about music. We all know how great music can be. There are even apps on your phone that you can download that will slow down music, which is very helpful. A lot of these kids' music, again, are just really fast paced. And to really hear the language, you can run those songs through apps that you can slow the melodies down to also encourage kids to be able to sing with the song. And I think that's a great way to use technology and music in the car to teach language. And then lastly, really in the car, we want to also think about the level that your child is at, in the sense that we want it to be participatory, and in the sense of not just talking at your child in the car if they're not talking very much, but again, making it simple. So even like we said, the 1 and 2 word phrases, but also making it simple in the sense that you have routines that you do over and over, so that they recognize, oh yeah, we're doing this again. So one of the routines that I've always done with my kids is we do a thankfulness exercise. I'll call it, either in the car or at mealtime or sometime, but we just talk about what we're thankful for. And it's actually a really good way to kind of in disguise work on functions. So we'll say what we're thankful for and why we're thankful for it. So for example,
Love that.
We'll look around and say, you know what, I am so thankful we have a sun, because the sun gives us light. The sun makes us warm. I am so thankful for the sun. So you can look outside even in the car, and again, just talk about the just funny things too. Like, wow, I am thankful for this stop sign, because if this stop sign wasn't there, this would be crazy. Nobody would stop, and they might hit, somebody could get our car hit. So you're talking about natural consequences and function, and it can just be a fun way to kind of talk about functions, but in a lighthearted way.
And then just predicting outcomes, or I mean, you can get into some really higher level language things happening there, but I like that. That's a really cute activity.
So hopefully these ideas gave you some things to do with your children in the community or in the car, and really understand what we're trying to achieve and what you are trying to achieve when you go to the parks. Things to just think about, and ways to purposefully work with your kids on providing some language opportunities, so that they can feel like they can maybe jump in and say a lot more, kind of progress in their language.
Yeah. And I think also just understanding that these a lot of times are not things that we even think about that are happening, but just showing that they are happening, just getting out and doing it and going through these routines. All of this is happening. And that's what was missed. And that's what we want to get back to, because it's important. So we will have, some resources on our website that have a lot of these ideas and some of the targets and goals that they work on. So we hope you will check that out and hope that they're helpful for you. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast and check out our website, thespeechsource.com.
Also, check us out on Instagram for more ideas on speech, language, feeding, and play.